Okay, Grandma, welcome back to another podcast.
Thank you, sir.
Good to have you.
Appreciate you
I
doing that.
thought, of course, I thought we could start with some questions. Okay, we'll do. Here's one from early life. How did your parents meet?
You know, that's a very interesting thought.
Yeah.
I don't really ever recall my mom explaining how they first met, whether it was at a church function or a barn dance or
Yeah.
what. But it was something I'll have to research for you.
Yeah, no problem.
I truly don't know.
Let's try another one. How about. Tell me about a time you got into the most trouble with your parents.
Oh,
The
interesting.
most trouble. You probably weren't in trouble a lot, were you?
Honestly, I wasn't because we were taught to be sort of fearful of doing things that
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly, it could have been the time when I accepted being cheerleader and hadn't told my mom or dad
Right.
until I told my mom, and she had to gradually explain it to my dad because, as I said, Helen Gelter had been a cheerleader and it was
Right.
okay.
Uh-huh.
But honestly, I didn't really have many opportunities to say we were in big trouble. Honestly,
Well, that's good. I like that. Let's see. I guess this is a question for I guess in your early 20s-ish. Were you a member of any groups or clubs? Because I
in
know
my
you were a cheerleader, but that was
um,
high school. But after that, were you in any clubs or groups?
no, just I'm so boring here. Really,
No.
um,
No.
I didn't belong to anything except unless I went to like a Bible study group.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's all I could say.
Mm-hmm.
We we didn't really have time to.
Well, church keeps you busy, you know?
I was absolutely busy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was your group
for
and club.
sure.
What was the best news you have ever received?
The best news?
Best news about anything.
Well, I'm going to say when my children were born, and they were okay.
Yeah.
I can say that was pretty fine news. Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
Okay. What did you find most difficult about raising children?
About raising children,
Yeah.
the exposure they get from other areas and wanting to share with them in an acceptable way without badgering it down their throat. That this really is not a good way to go or an easy thing to explain to a child,
Yeah.
because it's such a temptation to want to be like all your people around, and they don't know the dangers. Because, as I said, I'll tell you the honest truth. I was not allowed to wear shorts, and it was an absolutely hot climate in the summer.
Yeah.
And I did not know the consequences of dressing improperly and what that can do for other people, as to give them the okay to go ahead and do it, if it's really not the best thing to do. And the other thing is, I just didn't understand it until I got to be older, and I know what the sensuality of dressing provocatively
Right.
can be, and I did not understand any of that when I was young. So my mom and dad protected me that way, and
Nice.
said, "No shorts. You just go be modest," or what. They didn't say it. They just said no shorts.
Yeah.
And I knew not to wear like revealing tops or anything like that. That
Yeah.
was not even an issue. But yeah, that's one of the hardest things, is to share with children why this is good, this is probably not good to do.
Right. I foresee that being, when I have kids, probably the most difficult thing is is shielding them from certain
Yes.
influences.
Yes, because you see it on TV, you see it everywhere,
It's everywhere.
and you have to have them want to keep doing the proper thing when they're on their own.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Conversely, what did you find most rewarding about being a parent?
about being a parent,
Most rewarding.
oh, I tell you, there are people who talk about things in their life where the children are not even close to them anymore. And the fact that my children are Christians and they live a good life is a safety thing for a mom and dad to realize that that's what you want. So that's one of the most rewarding things, is to know that your children love the Lord, for one thing, and they're respected, and I just can't say enough for the thankfulness for that part.
Good answer. I like that a lot. We'll transition now into showing off some of Grandma's trinkets. We have more trinkets. We always have trinkets, my favorite part. And what I'll do is let me adjust this real quick. And so, Grandma, tell me about this bowl. What is this
If
bowl?
you can actually lift that bowl, you'll see how much heavier
Yeah.
it is than typical bowls are, and that's what the restaurant quality of old-time stuff, they want it to last for a long time.
Yeah, very heavy.
And I had one, and I says, oh, I'm going to show that because that's something you would never really know. The cups were equally as heavy and also much smaller. I bet you got maybe 5 ounces of coffee in one of the coffee cups because it was so different. It was but I haven't found one of those lately.
It's just very dense
But it
ceramic.
is, yeah. And you can tell
What do you
how
wear?
it lasted all those years.
Yeah, I mean, it's only got a little chip right here, and this thing is solid.
Yeah, and that we have talked about what a tobacco basket is.
Oh,
That is a miniature because tobacco baskets became so well sought after back there after, things are kind of phasing out and they don't use them anymore. It was something that they wanted us to state we would leave with the farm when we sold it. It's that valuable.
that little
They
basket?
would not no. The real ones are probably 4 feet square, and they're probably a tan color, like just a light tan, brown, whatever,
Yeah.
in real life. So that's a miniature, though, and I wanted to share with you that after the tobacco was grown, grouped into its little what we call hands, and tied at the top and compressed, they would lay that in the basket at the big warehouse to sell it.
Wow.
And it treated it gently because you don't want it to break off. And I don't know if my dad would have stopped growing tobacco if he had known what it does to folks, what they talk about now.
Right.
So I just don't know. It's just something to think about. They don't even have the warehouses like they did before, so
Right.
I don't know.
Well, interesting. So this is sort of like a small scale model.
Oh yes, it's
of
just
it?
a miniature
Yeah, something like that. what it
because
would
it's
look
4
like.
feet, about 4 feet square.
I see.
Maybe.
Interesting. And then, we have an interesting.
That's the bullet.
We'll keep that in there and we'll point it away from us.
One of the family members who was in the military brought home some souvenirs. One was that clear-colored green thing there was a buoy, and I have it's a whole collection that comes in like a lot of little ropey thing that it was used in the ships to kind of help know where the anchor was, I reckon. But they were in the
So-
military, and
Wow.
that's a real one from 1940.
The bullet or the green thing?
Both of them.
Oh wow!
Both of them, yeah.
So
they
this is
came
a glass buoy.
like a buoy. It would float on the water,
Yeah.
and there would be a cluster of them, and it would be held in. Well, I have some over there in a box, but it had a little kind of a ropey thing that would contain the whole group of them, and so they floated like a balloon. Only it's a glass balloon.
Wow.
So they used those with the ships, and one of Mom's friends up at the Bethlehem Church was having a garage sale, and he was from the military, and he was selling off his glass buoys from
Wow.
what he had brought home from the war.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And that bullet itself looks very old too. I haven't
Oh,
seen,
yes,
I haven't
it's-
seen that style of bullet.
It's from 1940s, evidently, or
That's
the
crazy.
war before, because people treasured things like that in those days. They would save it. It's probably a hazard to have around. It could maybe be dangerous. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But that the way the end of the bullet is,
Uh-huh.
that's very rare.
Yeah.
That sort of that shape of bullet,
Yeah.
you know, because the end part is the part that shoots out.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that might be World War One.
It could be.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. That's a pretty unique looking bullet.
But that's
But yeah, that's a cool this little buoy thing.
yeah.
That's really cool.
It was a cluster, like a probably 15 or so, or maybe fewer than that. But they would float on top of the ocean
Wow.
when the ship was out there, and that was another thing they brought back from not being typical on the farming community. They found that, and another thing that's over on the floor that they brought back from the war, and those were souvenirs they brought to the family.
Is this stuff they found in the ocean or?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
That
these-
was from the ocean.
wow.
And it stayed on Mom's little well top. You know where the
Oh, right.
crank was, where you put the well
Yeah.
and the water, get the water, and those stayed there.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this.
Now that picture is a picture that I talked about, the snakes that were in the house,
Yes.
and it was just about 3 feet from where Regina is sitting with her little rag doll. And the snake kind of was a long thing, went right in front of us as we went out to the car one evening.
Wow.
But we know that they were probably under the house, and somehow or other I kept being able to survive and live there.
Man.
But the
Oh, we've got a visitor. Okay, we're back. We had a neighbor knock at the door. So let's do this one.
And that is the church where my brother would preach on weekends, because he had a job with trucking companies, very capable in what he was doing. It was like dispatcher or something.
Yeah.
And so he preached there on weekends, because he went to the seminary also.
Right.
But that was the name of the little church that's not too far from our house in the country.
Interesting.
And I was just showing that. Liberty Chapel.
Very nice.
And that's a picture of Regina and holding Michael. That is the back trap door that went under the house where I had to walk. When you open up the doors
Yeah.
and lay them out open to get in and out, that's where the snake was that was
Ah.
woven in and out of the rocks.
Grandma.
That's why, but I like that picture of them too, so that's another reason that shared two purposes.
Nice.
And that's a picture of my mother and her, I guess you call it a half sister, They had a different mother because my mother's mother died,
Mm.
and her name is Thelma. They were very close.
Thelma.
Thelma and George Watson.
Interesting.
But that was a picture of them from when they visited once in the garden.
Nice.
And that's a typical picture of just a little picking. See, that is an actual bucket, 2 buckets of tomatoes.
Wow.
And so what we would do is take those in and can them, and they'd be ready for winter. But she had such a wonderful, successful garden. It's different back there from what it is here.
Did you guys can ketchup back then?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, she'd make ketchup.
I remember when I was a bit younger, we still had jars of ketchup from Grandma's
Yes.
farm, and it was
Yes.
so different. It was so good.
It was very good. I think I still have 1 jar of it.
Oh, that's right. We talked
I
about
will.
that.
I will try to find
We'll
that
have to break it
because
out and eat
yeah,
it.
because it's in glass. It's not that dangerous kind of thing where it would be like the BPA in the cans and
Right.
kept for years, and had enough sugar in it they would keep for years.
Man.
And that is a picture. You can take those little white things off if you want, and it's okay. But that's just another picture of her and her other sister, Frances and Floyd. And she was another half sister, had a different mom. And that's the one that Mom wanted Granny Hall to allow to go further into school because she was very sharp and was interested and wanted to.
Yeah.
And Granny Hall had said, well, she hadn't allowed the rest of the girls to go that beyond that, so she didn't have her go either. But Mom rooted for her, and of course that's Rod with them.
Yeah.
But they lived on a farm. They're all good people.
Very nice.
Well, now that's a picture of when we were on a visit to California, and you can see how young the children were, but it's Rod's mom and dad and some of his relatives, and Uncle Bobby is over on the far right. Uncle Bobby is now gone. He's deceased.
Right there.
He's the one on the closest to you.
Oh, here.
That's Uncle Bobby, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And that's Mike getting his first haircut by Grandpa Allee. We were on a trip out there, and that's about his age when we went the first time, and Grandpa Allee gave him his first haircut. He was good at doing
Rob's
that.
dad?
Uh-huh.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah.
Is that you?
Probably is. Yeah. That's me, probably.
You look happy.
Yeah. And that's a picture of Mike and Regina after we had moved to California. It shows their ages there. He was probably 3 or 4. And one of the funny things that Mike said, I have to tell you another story about the move to California. But he had gone with me to help take Regina to school every day because of a story that I'll tell you. I'm kind of out of order here, but when we first came to California, the place where we moved was a temporary house. We were renting, first of all, and there had been a murder of a little girl, and her name was Jennifer Flowers, and she lived out in the area, but it happened within view of just looking over probably a distance of half of a city block. You could see the little place where they found her little body.
Oh.
Nobody knew what had happened.
Wow.
So consequently, you can imagine the moms and dads were all very concerned, not knowing how this happened and who the culprit was. And so I drove Regina or walked her to school every day, back and forth for a long time. And Mike was with me, of course. He was a tiny little fella. He was just a year old when we moved there.
Yeah.
So when it got time for him to start to school, he realized that he wasn't going to be there with me to kind of keep me company. And he says, well, maybe we can get you a new baby. He said that.
Really?
And I don't think he ever remembers, but he was just being mindful of the fact we had gone together every single day.
Yeah.
Moms protect their kids. And
Oh.
I will tell you a story about the fact that the boy that had done the murder was actually back to back and one house over from our house. And I had been mindful of Mike being out in the yard when he was just a year and a half old, and he liked to play back there 2 years. And I thought, no, I shouldn't worry like that. But I kept an eye on him always.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very taken back when I found out how actually close the person was who had been found to do that murder.
Wow.
And Jennifer Flowers was just a little girl. She was like, it's in the history in the newspaper somewhere we could find out her age, but she was very young.
Mm.
And that happened the year just right when we moved.
Wow.
It was odd. Yes. And that's a picture a little bit later. I like that picture. It shows Regina and Mike on Easter. They've got little baskets, and she's hugging him, and he's just leaning forward faithfully.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a typical picture of them when we were there for about, I guess, a year probably. You can see their ages.
Yeah.
And that's a picture of Francis and Floyd. He's got a head of cabbage in his hand from their garden to show the way the crops were. I'm betting that he had just given Mom some veggies from their garden. I see a bag in her hand. Yeah.
And did she trade him a
Yeah.
head of cabbage?
Probably, but
That's
she
funny.
always had cabbage too. And that's a picture of my brother, Charles. We called him Punky all his life. And my mom, and then Libby, that's Charles' wife, and their little grandchildren. And the kids just always loved him. You could tell he just was much loved.
Yeah.
They just hugged on him and wanted to be with him.
Yeah.
See, they're all standing over on that side. So anyway, that was for the picture anyway.
That's nice. Here's a little sugar.
And that's typical of Regina when she was about 3 or 4, but that was probably taken back here in Fairfield, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Well, this is a typical picture of how we would go on little outings and vacation times with Mom when she was here, and sometimes Regina would come, because you can say that's in Solvang.
It looks like Solvang.
It is. That's Solvang.
Is that me? It must be me.
Yeah, look at you.
She came out here a couple times? Oh, man.
My mom?
Yeah, she came out here?
Every other year she came.
Oh, really?
She was faithful to come out and be here the opposite year. We always saw each other every year.
Nice.
And then when Rod had his heart surgery, she came out 2 years in a row, so that was a very good thing. Now those are pictures that show how large a group of kids going to a camp. You can just scan over it briefly, whatever. When Rod I talked about the fact that he would sometimes be in charge of a whole campsite. And that's how busy they were. You can imagine these little kids loved being up it's called a Sierra Christian
Yeah.
camp. I don't know if that's the same one you went to or not.
I think it might. I don't know. I went to one up there. Yeah.
But it's beyond Bakersfield. Now that's typical of how large they were. And the fact that I mentioned that Rod would come home from camp on a Saturday at noon
Yeah.
and preach the next morning and the next evening. He didn't ask for time off. And he was exhausted, I'm sure.
Wow.
I think about that. So, and that's another typical one of a camp, just to let you know the numbers of people. They love to go to those camps. And I would stay home with whichever child it was, because later Mike got to go to camp also. And that's just how big a group they had. Some of those people are the workers, of course.
Yeah.
That's understandable. And that's different. That's the picture of the people that of the church at First Christian.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
That's a group.
That's the roof up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a picture of the group of people that attended.
A lot of
And
people.
a lot of people. And when he first went there, it was, I don't know what the attendance was, but as I said, when he first went there, he was kind of shocked at some of the things he would find out the church had gone through, and it dwindled down quite a lot. So he worked hard to build it up. And I think that he was already able to have a second staff member, Carl Bookout, put on staff by this time. I think Carl's picture is over on the other side, in that big long one you've got. Don't worry, it's.
He's over here.
But he's over there, and so that's what that means, that Carl was there. And that was like a couple, 3 years after Rod went there and started the church, or kept working at it. But the next thing I was going, that's flashback from when Mike was a year old, and we went out to see Grandpa and Grandma Allee.
Nice.
But I was going to show the thesis, it's called, the book.
This one.
Yeah. That is something that was a requirement to get a certain degree. And there were only a certain number of years after you graduated regular school, college, to be able to work on that degree. So Rod was always aware of what the limitations of time were. And what he would do is he decided to go for it, and he had to do the research to get the information to write it. But this is another interesting part, because this is kind of what you want to know about my life also.
Yeah.
I would go up to the country and stay with my dad when he was becoming critically ill. And the year that Rod wrote this, it's called a thesis, to get a BA, whatever. I can't think of what the name of the degree is, but anyway, I would go up to the country and Rod would bring up all the writings that he had, and I would type it for the man who was doing the evaluation and grading of the thing.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, when you do the footnotes, or you type a page for one of these documents,
Yeah.
all the footnotes that belong to that information on that page have to be contained on the same page. And you have a certain guideline of what the margins are, and you could only have 3 total corrections on each page. So I would type those up in triplicate, with carbon copies, because one of them stays in the Bible college, and one of them, I don't know what the second one goes to, but there's another one over there we'll talk about a little bit later.
Wow.
But the margins had to be exactly a certain amount of distance, and yet you had to have that line at the bottom. So I had my hands full, but I got the hang of it.
Yeah.
But he would write those pages, and to be able to read everything and give the correct documentation for that was a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
So anyway, I typed that for him. I think I typed the next one also.
Wow.
I didn't even think about it now. I wouldn't even have the confidence to do it, but
That's amazing.
and it was not an electric typewriter. It was like a manual where you have to give the impression of the amount of pressure you do to make the things come out kind of even.
Right.
Anyway, that was one of his next degrees,
Wow.
and that's called a thesis. The next one is going to be called a different thing.
That one?
That's in a different phase. That comes after he's out at First Christian.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
We'll check that out another time.
So we did that, and you can see it's bound like a
Yeah.
book, and
This
so
is, how many pages is this?
I,
It's got to be 160 pages?
probably.
150 pages.
But he did those all that research and the flattering thing is the man who graded it was really a well respected, knowledgeable man, and he asked permission to quote something.
Wow.
He'd find something that was unique and different, and he thought, well, that's very good, and he wanted to share it in chapel time when the whole school would go down to chapel and
Wow.
go to a certain church and have a service. So that was flattering,
Very
know.
cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. He
Well,
was.
thanks for typing that up for Grandpa.
Oh, I tell you, it was. We were proud to get it done.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Look at that. Okay, did you want to, you said you wanted to go over some old history stuff first? You said you wanted to talk about some old stuff.
Well, that was partly it.
Okay.
The
got
fact
it.
that was out of order from when we
Oh.
went to First Christian, and the thing right there that's on that stand at the end of on the table, Christian, that is something like from the old days where people would repair their own shoes,
Yeah.
and you can see that there are a couple sitting on the table that are different sizes. That would be like for children's shoes, or you'd make it fit. And I guess they actually bought little shoe tacks and repaired their shoes, like when a heel came off.
Yeah.
Things were probably not as sturdy, or they had rough use in those days. It was not just really all easy to do.
Right.
And that is part of our heritage.
Wow.
We didn't have to do that when I was growing up, but that was saved from what they did do in a previous time.
So that belonged to your mom and her,
Mm-hmm.
and her
Mom and
parents?
Dad.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why it's still around here.
That's crazy.
Just those keepsakes,
How old is that, do you think?
Oh, it's well over 100 years,
Wow. Made in the USA.
'cause they didn't do that much.
Warranted.
Yeah.
It says warranted on there. Interesting.
And the thing at the top where they take it on and off, you can tell it's a different shape, and some of those would not fit in there. So I've picked one of them up in a store when I realized it was a
What it was.
extra size that I didn't have.
That's
So
amazing.
anyway, yeah, it's
Wow.
a little piece of history.
Very cool. It's amazing.
Well, I told a story about Jennifer Flowers. Oh, another thing that was a little bit of history, which people wouldn't think about nowadays. In our day, early on, they did not have spray bottles, and they didn't have steam irons. So how did they get the clothes ironed? And they would wear a white shirt to church every Sunday.
Oh.
Always wear a white shirt. What they would do is after the clothes had been washed and then dried on the line and then brought into the house, you had to be able to iron it, but you can't iron a shirt that's crinkly and dry. So they would take their hand and dip it into a little basin of water and just sprinkle it onto the clothing all over. And then you roll it up very compactly, and it has to sit for like 2 or 3 hours with a bundle of other things that you sprinkled and dampened, rather, you think it that way. And after that, the moisture has gone through and dampened thoroughly, so then you could iron the item because it would be so dry and crunchy you couldn't get the wrinkles out if you didn't do that. And then we had the development of steam irons.
Wow.
And later spray bottles, which help you to sprinkle if you need to have more. But you could use a press cloth, but that would be a mammoth job to iron an entire item of clothing to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think where we left off was you had just left Fairfield and moved to California. And so tell me about your house, the first house you moved in. You said it wasn't a permanent house, it was temporary, right?
There was a family who was gone from the church who knew they were going to be gone. I don't know if it was a military thing, what it was, but it was for a certain number of months. So we moved to that house, and we had a family in the church, a very nice man and woman named Vic and Jerry Coxhead, who had a little house they owned on 32nd Street. And they were going to be, after a couple or 3 months, maybe it was, they were going to be moving back down to Tarzana, where they had another house, because he was ex-military and he was having some medical issues. But they were going to move back down, so they wanted to know if we'd like to buy their house. And he wanted to make it so possible. He made it very, he was a great man, but he wanted to make it possible. We just hadn't thought about such a thing as buying a house.
Right.
But I think we spent $5,000 or $6,000 for that first house. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but
And what year was that?
that would be 1969, because we lived in the other house for probably 3 months is total. And the interesting thing was those folks that had rented that first house had just certain rooms blocked off and all their furniture stuck into it that they left there, so we could use just part of the house. It was fine. We didn't mind. We just kept our stuff kind of, in the garage.
Yeah.
But we were fine with that. And but they needed to come home fairly early, so that all worked out really well.
Interesting.
We
So, what did you bring from Fairfield?
That was another thing. Rod kind of always knew. I didn't think about such a thing, but he kind of always knew that he would be eventually going back home. So we didn't buy very much of fine anything. Our furniture was very humble there, but Mother had given us the china cabinet, which is very special. And she also gave us the desk the roll-top desk. Yes, and I'll tell you a story about that desk. Did I tell this already? Oh, this is funny. We bought that and our dishes and pans, clothing. It wasn't very much, really. We brought some canned goods. We had grown the garden in Fairfield and had a good little bit of stuff. So we brought just what we call a sensible amount of food with us in big glass jars. So that was about it. We didn't have a lot of stuff to bring.
Interesting.
But I want to tell you a story about that desk, and it's worth a fortune, honestly. It was owned by a lawyer from Lexington, was the story that we've got. And my dad just kind of liked it, and of course it was fine with Mom. And I don't know what he got it for, traded or whatever. But when we were on the farm in Decatur area, Russellville, and our neighbor, I haven't told this?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's good. He was the one where the wife turned the wagon wheel with all the post boxes on it, the post office things, and he was a little bit tricky, a little bit difficult, and we got along well with him. But one year, my dad sold that. Oh, I have to qualify this. He had some very rare antique wine press of some kind, or some system that he had sold to an antique store. But he was very difficult to deal with the people who owned the store. And so that makes a difference in what I'm going to share.
What's a wine press?
It's a very old way of getting the grapes kind of squeezed rather than the old Italian way where they stomp on them with their feet. But it was something very rare, and there could be some very old things in his household because his father-in-law was so into the old ways that instead of riding a car, he would walk through the fields to come and visit his daughter and my neighbor. Yeah. Wow. He would walk through the fields, and it was a very interesting thing. And he would shave off his beard once in the spring, go out with a tree, hang a mirror on the tree, and shave his beard, and that was it for the year.
Wow.
But when he came, it was a piece of history. It was a very interesting, a nice old man. We didn't have any difficulty with that. But the neighbor, the husband of person that lived right next door, this was his father-in-law that had evidently owned this special piece of antique thing. But I don't like to say names, so I won't. But the reason this is interesting, one year my dad needed money to buy seed corn. And my neighbor said he would buy that desk from him for $15. And so my dad sold it to him because it was out in a building. We couldn't get it into our house. It was a small house we lived in Ohio. And he had been so difficult to deal with in this previous thing with the wine press that he sold to the antique dealers. They wouldn't even come out and look at it. And he had hoped he would make a deal because he knew it was a nice desk. And so they wouldn't come out and look at the desk, and he thought he had a lemon on his hands. So in a couple of years, he said to my dad, Byron, if you'd like to buy back that desk for the price that you sold it to me for, I'll sell it to you. And my dad was very glad to get it back. $15.
Wow.
And it was just like a little loan, you know. But that shows you how times were really kind of tight, and that's the story about that desk, and it's a rare one.
Wow.
Has inlaid walnut and not a piece of what do you call it, fill in stuff. Anyway, it's solid.
Wow.
Anyway, that's the story about that desk.
How old do you think it is?
At least 200 years old, maybe longer than that, or
Really?
older. Oh yeah, at least.
Whoa.
And it was a rare thing. It has pigeonholes at the bottom. It's a pull-out thing, and so it's kind of like the value of that couple of chairs that my mom had one under each hand as they went out through the fire, and they evidently lost everything, and things they were given as just helpful things from neighbors or friends was the way they built their house again. So everything was old. Everything was old. But
Wow.
I felt very lucky to have that chair and tell the history of it. And
Yeah.
it's they had a table, and the china cabinet was a gift of my grandpa, my mom's actual dad, to her when she got married. That's how that got to be. That's how it wasn't in the fire. It was a gift, and it was already old when she got it. So
Wow.
anyway, that's a piece of history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, how did you like that first house that you moved into?
Into Ohio?
No, into California.
Oh,
When you came to California.
well, I was just grateful to say a house that I could live in, and I appreciated it. I never had any complaints. I will have to say, the first probably 6 or 7 months we lived there, there was a problem with, it was either a sewer line, yeah, it was a sewer line that was just absolutely a giant problem. They had to dig up the whole front yard.
Yeah.
And one of the people in the church was a person who did that kind of work. So we were so fortunate he was willing to come in and help take care of that. And he just kind of did it for us. So I tell you, that was a blessing, because we would have had a giant bill from that. And that was because and so it was really wonderful to be able to buy the house, and we still kind of stayed within our means always.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
Mike was not born at this point, right? It was just.
Yes, Mike was a year old when
Okay,
we
he
moved
was a
out
year.
here. Yeah.
And then Regina's 4 years older.
She's 4 years older, so she was 5, starting into kindergarten.
Got it.
And we drove her to school and picked her up because of the scary time that we told you about, the thing that had happened there.
Right. Do you
Yeah.
remember what school that was? Was that Juniper?
She went to Manzanita for a while, and there was another school that she had to go for the first year. I can't think if that was Manzanita or we drove her to a different school. It was, I have to find the name of that school, but we drove her back and forth. It was me. That was just my mommy duty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of car did you guys have?
We had the little red square back Volkswagen, and that's the one we towed, and there's a picture of it with a camper on the back, and that's what we drove across the country when we came here to move, and we would stay in that each night
Wow.
and sleep in that.
You slept in the car.
No, we could slept in the camper.
Oh, the camper.
It opens up and makes 2 double beds.
Oh, cool.
And it was nice, and it was a easy, good way to be able to travel. But when we would go down to see Rod's mom and dad, Rod had Mondays off, and Regina was in school. So I had to think of a way to keep her from being run down and tired. So I created 3 little mattresses. One fit between the wheel well, and it was just a solid bed back there. So she and Mike could go to bed on the way home from Rialto,
Oh, nice.
where they live. Yeah,
That's nice.
yeah.
So Grandpa started his church.
It was already started out here.
Right.
It was in a bad situation,
Okay.
but it was a new startup for him, of course, and he worked so hard. He really did. And of course, I did my thing. I did not ever really do a lot of teaching. That was not my expertise. But I played the piano. So we had piano in the morning, and Wednesdays we had choir practice after Bible study. And one time you asked what was some of the funniest things that the kids did, and one of them was the fact that when Mike would get tired, he'd go on the front row and go straight to sleep, just lay straight down on the seat of the front pew.
Oh, man.
And he would just go to sleep because he was tired.
Yeah.
But they stayed pretty well, so I'm grateful for that. And
How many members did you guys start out with when you transitioned to that church?
I have to be honest, it's going to be a guess, but I'm going to say probably 90 to 100, something like that. But the people really appreciated him, and as you can see the picture of the last one, I'll show you of those long, skinny ones, that he had grown to. When we got ready to go, it was about 350.
Wow.
So he was working hard. And after a couple years, we always had a lot of helpers, a lot of workers. And I remember that Pat McCullough used to lead singing, and especially with the kids. I can't remember who else. Oh, Chuck Bowman did the choir thing, and of course we were part of that. So, but it grew, and it was possible to add another staff member on in a couple of 3 years. And so as Carl Bookout came and helped with the youth group and all, and that's a busy thing to motivate kids, and and they had a good growing group of kids in the youth group. And then after I can't remember how many more years, but it was several years, they added another staff member. Of course, that we always had a secretary. The first one was Cinda Thomas, but I had a job that turned out to be a really helpful thing for her, where she went into real estate some way. And then there was a lady who was retiring from her work named Betty Krim, and she was the next secretary, wonderful gal. And only when she retired, they moved back to Indiana. And we were still friends, and we went to visit her in Indiana one time. So, and then the last one was Billy Bowman. And that was and when she retired from her professional job, she became secretary, and Rod got along well with all of them, every single one of them. They were just extra special people. So,
Did you what did you transition to for work when you came here? Did you have something lined up or no?
who, me?
Yeah.
I did not work.
Okay, you didn't work.
I just did the mom part. And I tell you, if you knew how Grandpa was so regimented in his work, my children would not have had any kind of family home time at all if I had worked.
Right.
Because he was working hard. He would go out and make calls in evening time after supper.
Yeah.
And the times when he did all the teaching and the office work, he did the running of the press. When we first came here, there was a gentleman named Jim Wilson who was helping to run the printing press, and they put this little paper out every week. Now, that takes a little bit of calculation because he would put the attendance and the offering and an article and the updates on the youth thing and all kinds of stuff that were pertinent. He had done this all back in Fairfield too, but he operated the printing press, which would sometimes break down, and so it was quite a process. Several hours doing that, just that part, writing it, and then he did that. So I forgot what I was going to say about that. Anyway, he was one busy guy.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you about how my job developed, but that was at the end. Mm-hmm. It was a special transition into, and it was 1 month before Mike graduated from high school.
I see.
So that's how that part happened.
Okay.
That I got my work. I did take classes over at the college just to keep my registration for nursing current, and I got my license in California and just kept up as much as I could and studied different classes. It was enjoyable, but they had to be kind of spaced in between other activities, that we were doing.
Interesting.
And so we were there, and Mike and Regina, you saw some of the pictures there of them growing. This was a picture at a little table that was in our house in the new place we moved to on 32nd Street. And that was 3 months or so after we came to California. So that was a picture of Mike as he was growing. You can see he was just a little young guy.
Yeah.
And sitting there, and we had a little puppy dog.
Who's that?
I think his name was Toby. Yes.
Toby.
Yes, he was named after a well-liked little character in a current day TV program. There was a little boy named that, and he was a sweet little boy. But Toby could hardly be contained. He was just really out and about, and one day he got out and went down the street and ate something that was poison. So he came home, and that was the end of Toby. But when he was, we had one dog before that who was an African Bazinji. And no, maybe that's not Toby. That is Toby. We had one before that, and when he found out he could climb the fence, he did it. And he's the one that died. Yeah. African Bazinji. I think his name was Pepper.
Wow.
But then we got Toby. One day, one of the gals who worked at the local park told us a little dog had come to their doorstep. Excuse me. And she wanted us to look at him. And we just took one look, and there he was. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Did you you didn't have a lot of pets in Ohio or like growing up, did you?
We had one. Yeah, we did have pets. We had a dog early on whose name was Bowser.
Bowser.
Bowser, yeah. And of course, they live their life, and sometimes you leave them on the farm where they are because they're very accustomed to it.
That's sad.
But his name was Bowser. But new people would be moving right in, so it's all good. They'd take care of him.
So when you'd move, you'd leave the dog with the new family?
Well, Rod did that up in Oregon because they knew they were moving from Oregon to California. And when they went back, they wanted to see the dog, and he had grown older, and he was with Jack, his brother. And the dog had gotten older, and he didn't recognize him. And Jack was so crushed about that, and Rod says, well, it's better if we just don't really disturb him because it would bother him a lot, to have him reject him totally.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, we did have pets, and we had one that Frank and I had brought up from the city one time and didn't even ask us, and brought a dog and left him, and we had him forever. And his name was Pepper.
Nice.
He was a good dog.
Nice. Well, I think we can end it here, okay?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
And then we can pick it up next time.
Absolutely.
Sound good?
I'll try to be more prepared next time.
Oh, it's fine. I love you, Grandma.
I love you more.